hear that they were getting another grandchild, but I was just floored. I burst into tears immediately and I just walked out. My sister came in to talk to me and I told her that I wouldn't be able to take in the baby. I don't want a new baby. I love my niece, but raising her is enough responsibility already. My sister told me that I would be wrong not to take in my niece's brother. She didn't mean to get pregnant. Apparently she was on birth control and she doesn't know who the father is. My parents couldn't take on a baby either, so it's up to me. My sister told me that I should feel blessed, but I don't. When I told my parents and niece, they were all very upset, my niece especially. I don't know what to do, but I can't take in another baby. I know it's my niece's sibling and my sister's child, but it would completely ruin my life. Am I the asshole for refusing to take in my sister's baby after I took in her daughter? Seven years ago, I, 35, adopted my niece, 9, from my sister, 26. My parents have health issues and could not take her in, so I took the responsibility. I love my niece and I'll never blame her for my sister's mistakes, but unfortunately, it uprooted my life. It caused a significant sidetrack in my career. I've even had to turn down better job offers because they wouldn't allow me to stay close enough to home. My parents love my niece, but could not take on the responsibility of caring for her, so I don't want to separate them. I had never planned to have children. I even had a boyfriend before I took in my niece, but he also didn't want to have children, and we made the decision to part when I took her in. We have never hid from my niece who her biological mother is, and even though the first few years of her life were hard, 3 years ago my sister started being in our lives again. She told me that she wishes for me to keep raising my niece because I have a better job and can afford it. My sister only has her GED and can hardly afford to keep herself afloat. She usually lives with her temporary boyfriend so she doesn't have to worry about paying for her own place. My sister acts like an aunt to her daughter, not like a mother, and my niece still loves her mother greatly. This past holiday we were at my parents to open presents and my sister gave my niece a present to open. It was a shirt that said, "I'm going to be a big sister," on it. We weren't sure what this meant, but my sister informed us that she was pregnant and that she wouldn't be able to keep it, and she was once again expecting me to take in the baby. My niece was so excited at the news, and my parents
Am I wrong for leaving my husband after I found out that he had cancer? So my husband and I had been married for about 10 years before we started becoming distant. A little while after, he actually cheated on me with one of my close friends. After that, nothing was ever the same between me and him. Now don't get me wrong, I still loved him, but things could never go back to the way they used to be. Eventually, he fell sick, started losing a lot of weight, having trouble breathing, getting random rashes on his skin. So we both agreed that he should go to the hospital to get checked. So he went to the hospital and had to wait a few days to get the results. A few days had passed, so he went back to the hospital to get his results. When he came back home, I asked him what his results were. He said everything was fine, there was nothing to worry about. Then he put his keys on the counter and hopped into the shower. A couple days before, I had lost my credit card. I looked everywhere for it, couldn't find it, but the only place I didn't look was my husband's car. So I grabbed his keys while he was in the shower and I went to his car to look for my credit card. I was thinking maybe it fell out of my wallet while I was sitting in one of the seats. While I was looking for the credit card, I found a folder from the hospital he just went to. When I looked inside the folder, there was his test result. It was a biopsy test that confirmed he had cancer. So I went back inside to confront him for lying to me. Come back for part 2.
I, 22 female, have been with my partner, 24 male, for 4 years now. I have never known him to do anything like this, but I noticed he started acting a little strange around a month, maybe a month and a half ago. He started putting fruit on the floor in the garden, and I thought it was a bit weird, but he said he was feeding the mice family, so I thought it was sweet and helped him do so. He started being really nice to me around 2 weeks ago and making me food, baking me cakes and stuff, which he never usually cooks, ever. So I was so happy he found a hobby. I did notice sometimes I felt sick and dizzy after eating, and I just put it down to lack of sleep/hormones. A friend of my partner's came into my work today and said he needed to speak to me when I was free. He told me that my partner has been collecting slugs from the garden and putting them in my food, blending them up. He sent this friend pictures of bags of slugs that he had collected and the pictures of blended slugs. I feel really sick to my stomach.
I had a first-time customer come in for a Brazilian wax. 3 weeks later, she messages us stating that she wants a refund because she had hair growing in. We explained to her that that is normal. After 2 to 3 weeks, you will notice hair sprouting back in and you're supposed to be back on your 4th week. She's like, no, I thought that after you get a wax, you don't get any hair at all. This was a waste of my money. We explained to her that it's not like electrolysis or laser hair removal. Yeah, your hair will get thinner, less ingrowns, less breakouts. It's a lifestyle, but it doesn't completely and permanently remove the hair as explained on our social media. She ends up disputing the charges. We won, of course. We just want you to know the hair does grow back after waxing.
I have been engaged to my fine ass for 5 years. We moved in together after our 2nd year of being together. We did everything 50-50, it's like how he suggested. Although over time I realized I was putting more effort into the relationship. I would cook, clean, do the laundry, and even work a full-time job. Well, he came one day to tell me that he had quit his job to focus on his dream, which is video game streaming. I wasn't sure if this was a good career, but I supported him regardless. At this point, he was completely living off of me. Mind you, he would spend 14 hours a day playing. And when I asked him to help out with the chores, he would ignore me and sometimes lock himself in the room so I don't bother him. So I would end up sleeping on the couch. I was okay with it all till when my worst fear happened. Couple weeks later, I found out that I was pregnant. Mind you, I didn't know how my Fang would feel about this news. I decided to tell him over dinner. So I went grocery shopping to make him his favorite food. I really thought that this was a great way to bond again. I called him to make sure he frees himself that night. He said he will just grab a new game setup with his buddy, and that he will be home by 8. So of course I started rushing thinking I won't be ready by then. But 7:45 the food was ready, and so was I. I put on his favorite dress, and I had a feeling that our relationship will be okay again. An hour passed by our original schedule, and he didn't show up. I called him and didn't answer. Called his friends, and no one knew where he was. Then I remembered he has his location and I didn't believe my eyes. I checked his location, and he was at his mom's house. I was super confused to why he would be there, or why he wouldn't pick up my calls. I didn't want to call his mom since she'll start nagging at me and blame me for how her son turned out. I decided to wait for him, and I ended up sleeping on the couch. Next morning, he shows up. And when I asked him why he didn't show up last night, this is what he said. I needed a break from the house, and you're nagging. You're suffocating me, and you don't appreciate me anymore. And said other hurtful things along the lines. He grabbed a few change of clothes, then left. I cried that day nonstop, then called my dad to pick me up. Later that month, I lost the baby due to extreme stress. I broke everything off with him and kept the diamond ring as a payment for everything I did for him. And took me months to heal after losing my baby.
I found out my dad was a zoophile. For those of you that don't know what a zoophile is basically someone who has sexual attraction to animals. Okay, back to the story time. My name is Layla, and I'm about 15 years old. Growing up, I had a pretty good relationship with my father. My mom had died when I was about 5 years old, so it's just been me and him ever since. For whatever reason, my dad just loved to bring animals around. But for whatever reason, they would die very, very quickly. And he would never let me see them before they died, which I found weird. So one day, I had gotten this new dog, Chloe. My dad absolutely loved Chloe and would kiss her all the time. And he would always cuddle her to sleep. He would get upset that I would take her and cuddle her to sleep when it was my dog, but we took turns to solve this. So I kind of noticed that Chloe was acting very funny. She was licking her behind a lot more than usual. And I don't know, I watched her all the time when I was outside. I talked to my friend about it, and they made a joke saying if my dad was doing stuff to my dog. I got defensive because my dad would never do anything like that, but I took their words into consideration. And then I set up cameras. Come back for part 2.
It's time for Cookies and Crime. This is the story of Belle Gunness, the first female serial killer I'm covering in this series. Belle was born November 11th, 1859 in Selbu, Norway. She moved to the United States in 1881 and lived with her sister and brother-in-law in Chicago. She first worked as a domestic servant, then got a job at a butcher's shop cutting up animal carcasses until she got married to Mads Sorensen in 1884. They owned a candy store together, but one day it mysteriously burned to the ground. Then the couple's home was also burned down. The couple received insurance payouts for both instances. Before their home burned down, 2 babies had died in their home from inflammation of the large intestine, which can result from poisoning. Belle had insured both of the children and collected a large insurance check after each death. Neighbors gossiped at the news because Belle never appeared to be pregnant. Belle's husband had also purchased 2 life insurance policies for himself. On July 30th, 1890, both of those life insurance policies overlapped, one expiring that day and the other beginning. Mads died of a cerebral hemorrhage that day. Belle explained that he had come home with a headache and she provided him with medicine for the pain. But when she later checked on him, he was dead. Belle collected a total of $5,000 from both life insurance policies. That's equivalent to about $140,000 in today's money. With that money, she moved to LaPorte, Indiana and bought a pig farm. On April 1st, 1902, Belle married a Peter Gunnis. The following week, Peter's infant daughter died of an unknown cause in Belle's care. And then 8 months later, Peter died of a skull injury. Belle told police that Peter had reached for something high on a shelf and a meat grinder fell on him, smashing his skull. They suspected her of murder, but nothing came of the case. Belle was able to collect insurance money for Peter's death. Then, Belle started placing marriage ads in the Chicago newspaper. After corresponding with these men for a few months, they would come to the farm with a large amount of cash and the promise of marriage and would never be heard from again. Then, in April 1908, Belle's farmhouse burned to the ground. In the ruins, authorities found the bodies of a headless adult woman who they initially believed to be Belle Gunnis and her 3 children. Local newspapers headlined with Belle as a praiseworthy woman who died in a fire in a desperate attempt to save her children. That headline was soon rescinded when they found an additional 11 bodies on her property. Ray Lamphere, Belle's on and off lover, would tell the police everything. One of the victim's brother warned Belle that he would arrive at the farm to investigate his brother's disappearance. To avoid being discovered, Belle asked Lamphere to burn down her farmhouse with her children inside. She would fake her own death and flee. Even with this information, Belle was still pronounced dead. They claimed the headless body they found was Belle, even though the body was shorter than Belle's height. What actually happened is still unknown.
Why don't you say it, baby? Not like I don't mind, but we're so toxic lately. Don't you waste my time. Who you been fucking faking like I'm out